all this time, we've been actually looking at a volume renderer. Now we're going to actually get into the actual surface renderer that's built into the Maya Fluid system. All right, we're going to start fresh here, and this time I'm actually going to create a 3D container with an emitter. Okay, and I'm going to increase my resolution to something like 25, 50, and 25. Okay, and again, these are pretty low conservative numbers. We're just going to use this as a preview. All right, let's go ahead and play this back, and you'll notice that my particles do come out, but they hit the top of the surface, and we actually want them to sink. So let's move our emitter up a little bit, and if you remember, we're going to go into the density and do a negative buoyancy. Okay, and I'm also going to increase this scale to 1. All right, so what we should end up with are some particles that come out and hit the ground. Now, we have an opacity issue here. You can kind of see it as it's moving down here. Let's go ahead and adjust that. We're going to go down to the shading, and we'll remove this transparency. Okay, and I know it looks kind of blobby, but we'll adjust this here in just a second. All right, so now that we have talked about a lot of these options, let's talk about this surface here. I'm skipping the grids cache because I'll leave that for when we get to our caching lesson. All right, again, all this time we've been working with a volume renderer. Now let's talk about the surface renderer. Let's activate it, give it a second, and the system will actually try to create a surface for the fluid simulation that we've created. Now, you've got to remember that if you look in here really close, you can actually see the actual voxels that make this up. So again, you're going to need to set this at a higher quality to get a really good result. But let's talk about some of these options. I'm going to hit the render button, and what we're going to get is essentially something that looks like this. Now, again, we're looking at this at a very low res, and our render settings are very low. Knowing that, let's take a look at the difference between a hard surface and a soft surface. The hard surface is going to give you nice sharp edges, where the soft surface is actually going to try to get the edges a little bit blurred. Okay. Now, there is a surface tolerance that's available to you. Again, the higher this number is, the higher the tolerance to actually create the implicit mesh or implicit surface that it's trying to generate. So again, you get a little bit of control on how blobby this is going to be before it actually becomes a surface. Now, there is an option here to control the tolerance, and if you have little holes, you can decrease this, but again, the lower this number, the more it's going to have to compute that frame. So just be very careful. You can probably get away with that quite a bit. And you can see here I've softened this up a little bit, and I've got a really nice image. Okay. Now, this little fuzzy edge here, let's go to our render settings, and I'm just going to change this from custom to production quality. Okay. By doing that, you'll notice that if I render just this portion, I get a nice soft edge. It's not great, but pretty good. Okay. We can set a cosine color, so we can actually come in here and set a little bit of specularity. If I have a light in here, it'll actually pick that up and show it. I don't think we're going to see it here. Yeah, you can kind of see it right here. All right, so you have that ability. What I like is this next option, which is the environment. And you can actually create an environment sky. So this is the top of the sky, and this is the bottom of the sky. Okay, so top, I'm going to pick a kind of a dark purple, and down below, I'm going to pick a lighter color of that blue. All right, let's accept that, and let's render this. And you can see here, this is really cool, that highlight is showing up here. You can kind of see it right in here. And so again, it picks up those highlights and then reflects back the color. It's pretty neat. Now, if you really want to focus on the quality of this output, there is a shading quality tab down here. And I can actually multiply this quality. Okay, we'll take a look at how that's different. And you can see here the edge looks really good. Now I'm seeing a lot like it. So again, what you're going to decrease in render time you're gonna be able to pick up in quality. So you do have this. Now this render interpolator, instead of linear, if you set this to smooth, let me just show you what this looks like. So here is that over here is before. I'm going to re-render this for and you can see here that the quality of this mesh looks so much better. It's a very smooth output. I'll re-render this little section that was very faceted. Again, much slower, but you get a really, really incredible result. Let's just render the whole frame, and I'll let you take a look at that. As these are coming back, you can see that we're now starting to get a very nice liquidy effect without a lot of work. But again, we are going to take that time in rendering because we're asking it to do such a high quality image. Connect to the entire system. I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. Now, if we wanted to, we could go into our shading and change the color here. So if we wanted to change this color to, let's say, something of a green, we could do it here. And again, we could choose a ramp. So if we wanted to have a darker green, we could do that as well. And we can input this into a number of different settings. But when you're generating the meshes, you want to keep it very, very simple and focus this on, what we're trying to create with this liquid effect. Okay. So with that said, let me delete these colors, and let's just take a second to look at the output mesh settings. So again, you have an ability to override the mesh resolution. Okay, so here's a mesh resolution of 1, and then here's a multiple of 3. So it was at 2. Again, this is going to get us higher and higher quality at the expense of render time. Okay, so something to keep in mind. Now, if you want to really get this smooth, you can turn on gradient normals, which will give an extra level of smoothing that maybe you can't get with just the smooth. So if you want to combine those, you can definitely do that and combine those. Now, the only other attribute that I have not talked about is the refractive index. Again, if you have some transparency in your system, in your particle system here, and you have an object back here, you can increase this refractive index, and it will actually refract the image behind it or the object behind it. Again, depending on what you're trying to do, I'd recommend you do this in post or run a separate pass so you can control it explicitly. Now, before we get too far, I'm going to go ahead and close these panels up here. And in a second, in the next lesson, I'm going to talk to you about actually taking this and turning it into a mesh, which might be more useful than just having a hard surface render.